I begin by taking a doubled strand of the same silk that I used to make the buttonholes. I'll thread up my needle, and then I'll take my wooden bead, and I need to lock this in place first. So I pull the thread through the center, leaving the tail, leaving the tail poking out the top a little bit, and then because it's a doubled strand, I just insert the needle between the double strands next to the knot and draw it up and pull it tight down near one of the holes. Next thing I'll do is I'll work my way around the button one at a time. I'll make the little spine, and if you notice how I'm putting the needle through the button, you can see that I'm making a little sort of interlink at the bottom. You may not be able to see it, but just notice the passage of the thread and the direction and side of the needle that it's on, and you'll be able to make the spines the same way I am. So we work this 6 times so that we have 6 spines on the button. Now, most of the authentic ones from the time period are done with a finer thread on a smaller foundation, and they're usually done with 8 spines or more. 6 is relatively low in number for spines, but when you're beginning and you're trying to understand the structure of the button, this is a good way to go. So I have one more to do, and then we can move on to the next step. The important thing is to, get these in, and you want to pull them kind of tight, but you don't want to just yank them down super tight onto the bead. So now we have 6, and we can move on to the next step. In this step, we're going to start working our thread horizontally around all of the spines. So I'll turn the bead knot side up, and then I'm kind of poking the knot down into the hole a little bit, and then I'll stick the needle right to left under one of the spines. And then I'll turn the bead and I'll go under the next one. You can see that I'm pulling it kind of snug and locking it in place. Then I'll put it on a mandrel, and a mandrel is any kind of stick that you can poke the bead into and it'll hold. The mandrel itself is a jewelry making term or a bead making term, but either way, it's what we have to do here to make sure that everything stays tidy. It makes it much easier to hold it in the hand. You can turn it easily as you work. For me, it reduces the stress all over on the hand, and I find it very convenient. Sometimes I'll use a knitting needle. This device that you see in my hand is actually part of a 16th century eating utensil kit. It's actually a spike, which served the same purpose as a fork. However, I rarely use it for that, so I just have it here in my shop, and I use it as a mandrel for making the buttons. And I find it's got a nice weight to it, and it feels good in my hand. So I'll work my way all around this button, and we're going to break here and skip forward in a moment. But the stitches go right to left, and you can see that my needle is going below the thread as it's hanging, and that means that I'm not interlocking it with every stitch. But you're seeing sort of a framework build up around the button that's horizontal. But the spines, a lot of people make these buttons so that the spines are very rope-like and on the outside, but this is the reverse of that. I've not actually seen a button made quite like that in the time period, but they are made like this. So what'll happen is at the end, we will wrap up the valleys between the spines and pull tight, and it'll create this ridged sort of acorn effect. And it's really quite nice. And it's soft and it's durable. Okay, so we've skipped ahead here, and now I'm reaching the bottom, so I'm about to take the mandrel out because now it's in my way. Now I'm just working along the bottom, and I'm just going to keep taking these stitches and filling in the empty space along the bottom until the whole button is covered. I really like the way these buttons end up looking. They're nice, they're authentic, and the smaller the wooden bead you can get, the better. This is a 9mm bead. It's about a 3/8 of an inch bead, which makes a pretty large button for what the time period really was. If you can get like a 6mm wooden bead, which I have a very hard time finding, then you'll have a much more accurate size bead to create your buttons. Unfortunately, what's usually available in craft stores is a 9mm or even a 10mm bead, and they're just big, which they're not out of the realm of possibility for the time period, but as a general rule, I think they were a little bit more rare than we're able to make today. Okay, so the bead is fully wrapped, and now we're going to move on. So I'll use a separate thread to make the spines and the bullion knot on the top of the bead. I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to knot it, and then I have my bead, and I'm going to go up through the bottom and out through the top. Now you can see here, you've just got to push it right through and pull it tight, and then what I'll do is I'll run it down between the spines. So you can see when I was wrapping it, you have ridges where the spines are and then none. So I'm going to aim for just laying this thread right down one of those spines, and then I'm going to flip the bead over, and I'm going to take a tiny little stitch through the top, and then I'll run my thread down another set of spines, between another set of spines, around the bottom, and then up again the other side. And I'll do this 3 times because there's 6 spines, so I'll have 6 valleys to thread. So I'll go around the bead 3 full times, and then I'll end up right at the top. And when I end up at the top, the last thing that I do before plunging back down through the hole will be to create the bullion knot. But just keep laying the threads in the valleys until you have all the different spines. You see that right there? It looks so nice and shiny and fluffy. It's a good bead. When we make the final pass with the spine, we are at the very top of the bead, and our thread is coming out one side since we've just taken a stitch through it. So now we need to make our bullion knot. So I'm going to insert the thread from the other side as though I was just making a loop at the top, and I'll exit right next to where the thread was coming out before, and I'll wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. I'll grab the wraps and then just pull the needle out, and you can see that it's creating this sort of heavy wrapped area, and then I'll take one more stitch below in exactly the same place where I just did before, and I'll pull it tight, and you can see that it makes this perfect little curl right on top. The next task is just to put the needle through back to the bottom, and then I will take a few tacking stitches to complete the button and hold the thread in place, and then cut it off. One, two, and now it's secure, and I can just chop it right off, and now it's ready to go on the garment. To put the button on the garment, first we have to mark the placement, and so we've just aligned it so we can make the mark with the buttonholes in line. And then I'll use a doubled strand of the same silk that I made the button with, take 2 stitches just to keep it secure to the garment, and then I'll insert the needle on the bottom of the bead just around one of the 6 spines. and then I'll take another stitch through the edge of the garment. This is the way they're put on in the time period, as we go through the edge, not through the surface. And once I've taken another stitch through the edge, then I'm going to go and take a stitch through a different spine on the button, and then you'll see that I'm leaving about 3/8 of an inch of shank, maybe 1/4 of an inch at the most. And then I'll rotate the button, I'll take another stitch, and I'll just keep doing this until I have gone all the way around the button. And what I'll end up having is I'll have about 6 to 8 strands of thread connecting this little bead to the surface of the garment, or to the edge of the garment. And then what I'll do at the end is I'll wrap the shank very tightly with the silk, which I believe that I'm about to do here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wraps, and I'll pull it nice and tight. And I work my way from the top of the button down to the base. And I think I just put an extra wrap in there too, because it seemed like it could use it. Once I've wrapped the entire shank and I have a very strong cord holding together the button and the garment, then I'll take 2 or 3 stitches in one place, and I will tunnel through and clip my thread so that I can move on to the next button. So you see, I tunnel through the layers and pull the needle out some distance away from the button, and then I'll clip. And that leaves a tail, which makes it less likely to come unstitched, but that tail ends up burying itself inside the garment. And there you go.